And we're back with part 2 of this button-down ruffle dress, a Naomi pattern hack. If you have not watched part 1 yet, we covered the actual adjustments to the pattern pieces and getting that all cut out. So I've linked to part 1 in the info box if you haven't checked that out. Also, if you haven't grabbed the Naomi pattern, it's linked in the info box as well.
So let's start on the back. Right side together, we're going to grab our back of our dress and the back facing. We're going to lay those out and pin them together. And we're going to pin them together at this inside edge. Okay, so we're going to go to the sewing machine and sew from the top down here, pivot, and back up. So once you've got your stitching done on this inside here, go ahead and press your seam allowance, and then we're going to come back and trim it. So I've got a nice clean press here, and I'm going to go in with some scissors and I'm going to slit this V, and I'm going to turn this facing me just so I can give it a clean cut. But at your V, take your scissors and you're going to snip to that V. Do not break the stitching, you're just going to clip to the stitching, okay? And then the rest of your seam allowance, I'm going to trim it down with some scissors. So now it's time to understitch. So we're going to fold this facing out and press your seam allowance towards your facing, okay, if it's not already. And then from the right side, we are going to stitch through the top, and we're going to catch the seam allowance underneath. So we're going to do that all the way around, getting to your point and coming back up. And remember, so now that we've got that done, we're going to close up the facing. So we've got this back neckline done. Now it's time to do the outside. So we're back right size facing, and we're just going to pin the rest of this together. And we're going to do that on both sides. So this time we're going to sew across the short side and then down to the end of the seam. And we're going to do that on both sides. So let's go back to the sewing machine. Okay, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to trim that seam allowance. Since this strap is really closed up, there's not much we can press, so we'll save the pressing for the next step. So go ahead and trim that seam allowance. And then on the curve, I like to take my small scissors and then I'll clip about every 1.5 inches or so just along this curve. It just helps to release some tension so that when this facing is laid to the inside of the dress, it'll lay out very nicely. Now head to your ironing board. A Southern girl, it's really hard for me to say the word iron. But head to your ironing board, Flip out your facing as far as you can till about right here, and press the seam allowance towards your facing again, because we're going to do the same understitching, but just in this area here on both sides, because that's where we can reach. So now that that's done, you'll want to turn your straps right side out. And now give those straps a nice clean press, and then we can move to the front. So turn your dress panels right side up. And then we're going to pin our facings to the right side. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to start on this inside edge here. So we're going to go to the sewing machine, starting at the top all the way down, making sure that you pivot, give yourself a nice clean pivot here, and we'll do the same here. So now I want you to, at this corner here where we pivoted, I want you to snip in there, snip to your seam line. I'm going to show you up close. I'm going to snip right here. So I'm going to turn mine around just so I can get to it. Okay. And now trim that seam allowance just like we did the back. And same as the back, we're going to press that seam allowance towards your facing, and then from the right side we're going to understitch the entire side of this facing. We're going to do that on both sides. So I'm going to And now we're going to close up the remaining side of that strap. Right side together. Same as before, you'll want to trim your seam allowance. And then clip into that curve. Head to the ironing board, flip that facing up, make sure that seam allowance is pressed flat towards your facing, and then let's head to the sewing machine to do that last bit of understitching. So the last thing we're going to do on our facing is trim it down on the extension area on both sides. So flip your dress over. And the reason we're doing this, we're going to trim this area, just this section here, okay? We're trimming this because when we start to fold this over, we've got a button and a buttonhole to place up here, and we don't want to have to sew through 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of fabric. Okay, so let's trim just this little section here, just about a couple of inches. I'm gonna trim that facing out of the way, okay? So then when we fold over, we've still got a nice clean finish, but we're not too bulky up here, okay? So we're gonna do that on the other side. And I'm trimming this seam allowance down to about 1/2 inch. I mean, the facing down to about 1/2 inch. So now we're getting to the fun part. We're getting to the buttons and the buttonholes. So now it is time for us to stabilize the right side of our dress. We're gonna stabilize the buttonholes with interfacing. And I'm not gonna put a whole strip down here. You can if you would like. I'm just gonna cut some small strips that are just slightly bigger than what my buttonhole is gonna be. And then I'm going to interface the back of my dress using the interfacing, fusible interfacing.
Now, as I was placing my interfacing where my buttons are going to go, I noticed that I still had a little too much bulk, and so I trimmed some more of that facing on the wrong side of my dress. So if you see that, go ahead and trim it. It's perfectly fine.
So once you've got your interfacing applied to the back of your buttonholes, go ahead and press those on. And so I've got my interfacing all laid out here and pressed on. Now we are going to fold and press 1/4 inch along this edge. Then, once you press that up, you're going to fold another 2 inches, like so. And press. And make sure that your facings are tucked in nice and neat, because you'll want the inside of your dress to look beautiful.
So we've prepared the right side of the dress, meaning the right side as it is worn on your body, and we're going to grab the left side of the dress and do the exact same thing.
Okay, so we're going to sew. We're actually going to top stitch, so we're going to sew from the right side. We're going to start at the bottom of our dress, down here, just about 1/8 inch, just a very scant width away from the folded edge. We're going to sew all the way up to the top, sew across, and then back down using your finger to feel that folded edge. You can see it here on my dress. And you're going to sew just about 1/8 inch inside of that folded ridge. So you're going to create a nice clean stitching on the outside. Same thing goes on this side. Start from the bottom, up, across. You're going to use your finger to guide yourself coming all the way back down. So let's head to the sewing machine. So we're going to start with the buttonholes. Go ahead and install your buttonhole foot if you have one, and grab the right front of your dress. And we're going to sew our buttonholes. I'm actually going to start at the bottom here. So now that I've got my buttonholes here, I haven't opened them up yet. I will in a minute. I'm just double checking the placement of my buttons with my little stickers here, making sure that my buttonholes and buttons align. Now I'm going to grab some tape and my buttons, and I'm going to tape my buttons in place to sew them. Okay, now we're gonna head to the sewing machine and sew these buttons on.
Okay, buttons are sewn on, pulling the tape off, and then I'm going to secure my buttons by pulling the threads to the wrong side of the dress. If you need help with buttons, if you want a button tutorial, leave me a comment below. I'm assuming that if you are doing this much pattern hacking, that you already know how to sew on a button. But if this is something that you would like some help with, just leave me a comment below. I'll be happy to do a tutorial on it. So now it's time to sew the front of your dress to your back. And you're going to do that at the side seams. And then when you're finished, go ahead and button your dress to create one whole piece. So now grab the two pieces that you're going to use to make the bottom ruffle. So working on one of those pieces, you're going to fold up and press a 1/2 inch to create your hem. And you're going to sew that hem and do that for both pieces.
Now we're going to create the gathering. We're going to, on the raw edge, we're going to sew a basting stitch about 1/4 inch inside, and we're going to use that to gather our fabric.
Then you're going to sew those two strips together at the side seams, right sides together, 1/2 inch seam allowance.
So go ahead and grab your dress, and we're going to gather our bottom ruffle here until it meets the dress. And we're going to match up our side seams for reference. And once you've gathered it and you've got it to the width that is equal to your dress, flip it over so that it's right sides together with your dress. Pull your dress through the middle, and then you're going to pin starting at the side seam. So now we're going to sew this seam all the way around, finish the raw edges, press the seam allowance, and that's it.
We're done. I want to see your look. So if you post your look on Instagram, make sure to tag me at Style So Me Patterns. You can also tag me on Facebook. I would love, 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 love to see this. If you enjoyed this pattern hack and you want to see me hack more patterns, leave me a comment and let me know, because this was so much fun and I'd love to do this again for you. All right, I'll see you in the next video. Enjoy your dress.